Today I'm going to talk about Nazi policies towards the church and how they try to bring the church into Volksgemeinschaft. So first, before I get into the church itself, for the policies towards the church, I'm going to get into the church itself. So I'm going to divide this into three parts. First, the Catholic Church, then the Protestant and/or Confessional Church. There's a difference, I'll explain in a bit, and then the Reich Church. So let's start with the Catholics. Well, it was led in Nazi Germany, not Nazi Germany, but in the time of Nazi Germany, it was led by Pius XI, from before up until 1939, and then from then onwards would be Pius XII, who Pius XII was actually like an understudy or some sort to Pius XI. Well, the Catholic Church consisted of, in Germany, of 6 archbishops, 19 bishops, and 20,000 priests. And it was more in the north and east area. So Berlin was kind of more Catholic. Oh, there was still Protestantism in these areas. It was Berlin that was more Catholic and Munich more Protestant. Well, Catholics formed 32% of the population, which, if you like the numbers, it's 22 million. So, I mean, it's not the majority, but it's still a significant number. They had youth organizations, schools, charities. It's the Catholic Church. What do you expect? A famous, notable figure from the Catholic Church in Germany was Juan Galen. I've mentioned Juan Galen before in the video on the Himmler one, which also houses like the opposition to the church, to Nazis by the church. And I'm going to get into Juan Galen in just a second, but just know that he's in the Catholic Church. Like I also mentioned in that video, the Catholic Church is really hard to control because they don't own any loyalty to Hitler. It's all God and then the Pope, not Hitler. So Hitler's going around with the Hitler myth, and like, oh, I'm a Messiah sent to you by God, but the Catholics are like, yeah, great, I'm going to go worship God with the Pope. So I don't know who you are, but you're not my spiritual leader. They did have political parties, like the Catholic Center Party in the 1920s, which was quite a significant party. It led many coalitions. And then, quite notably, Pius XI published one of the, I know it wasn't intended to be funny, but it published With Burning Grief, the most useless and possibly, with different perspective, funny piece of opposition to Nazi regime ever. Like, he literally went, basically, oh my God, Hitler, you broke our pact, how dare you? It's Hitler, come on. Did you really think he was going to keep his word? So then I'm going to now get into the Protestant Church, or the Confessional Church, where, well, 2 men, Martin Niemöller and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, again, like with all the names, I probably butchered it, but these men established the Pastors' Emergency League in September 1933, just a few months after Hitler had come into power. He came into power in January, this was in September, and this is still inside the Protestant Church. And they established the Confessional Church in 1935. So 2 years later. There were 5,000 clergy, and the theology was purely based on the Bible. No other sources, just the Bible. They did oppose the Reich Church, like I'm going to explain in a bit. And yeah, there were quite a few people following this. So remember how I said 32% of the population were Catholic? Well, actually, 58% of the population were Protestant. And if you, like I said, like numbers, it's 45 million. So the Protestant Church was, like, the Reich Church tried to absorb the Protestant Church. They tried to, like, put the Protestants under them. And the Confessional Church, well, the Protestant Church, some areas, broke away in 1934 with the formation of the Confessional Church in 1935. By the way, you're going to hear me say church quite a bit in this video. It, like the Catholic Church, it did have youth groups, so there were still Protestant youth groups. I mean, it's kind of, I know it's common in children, but like giving them like religion being present in education, I think it's, you shouldn't have religion there. It's kind of indoctrination. Well, yeah. They also had a political party. So the Catholics had the CCP, the Protestants had the DVP and the DNVP. So Catholics were more centered, Catholic Center Party. Protestants were more right-wing, DVP, DNVP. And after all, Lutheranism, it all started in the 15th century in Germany. So it made sense that it was like quite popular there. And like I said, Protestantism is more the right wing, so it's more nationalist. So yeah, that's the Protestant church in Germany. And now the Reich Church. The Reich bishop was Ludwig Müller. Now there wasn't such thing as in the Reich Church, God is Hitler, kind of. And I'd like to think that the leading Nazis, they were like archangels or like saints or stuff, because they can't be God, but they can't be touched by the people, if you know what I mean. So if in the Reich Church, in the whole 1,000-year-old Reich, they have to be important figures in the church. So I'm guessing it's like archbishops who serve the savior Hitler. Well, the Reich Church officially consolidated itself as a collection of Protestant churches that merged together in 1936. And it was this doctrine of positive Christianity, which, I mean, it was compatible with Nazism. And according to Hitler, you could not be a Christian and a German. So by extension, you could not be a Christian and an Aryan. So if you wanted to be an Aryan, you had to belong to the Reich Church. Which is kind of stupid, but what would you do? Anyway, policies towards the church. That was like a brief overview of the church in Germany by this period. So now, what the Nazis did towards the church. Well, first, like I said, I'm going to go Catholic, Protestant, Confessional, and then Reich. Well, the Catholics, after 1935 or 1936, they had their public meetings restricted, their newspapers censored, propaganda. They tried to do a propaganda campaign against corruption that didn't really work, and it was difficult to hold the numbers of those in the youth groups because they either stopped going to youth groups because they had been told that the Catholic Church was bad, or because they joined other youth groups like the Hitler Youth, and for women the BDM. In 1937, the Gestapo and the SS were present in the church. They tightened restrictions on press. They had this huge propaganda on sex scandals. So they managed to arrest 200 priests because of these alleged sex scandals, which, I mean, it's the Catholic Church. I believe them. But everything like pilgrimages, processions were restricted, and the monasteries were closed. Yeah. But of course, this was more than to prevent religion being practiced, is to prevent religion reaching other people. So kind of anti-religion propaganda, so stopping the spread. And this was as well like the Gestapo and the SS. It was also the Ministry of Propaganda. The Ministry of Propaganda, they did everything. Everything in the Nazi regime is thanks to that. And that's one of the reasons I am fascinated by Goebbels. It's just impressive how much power this one ministry had. And of course, the Nazis did sign the Concordat in 1933. Which I just like to think, I really like to compare the Concordat with the piece of paper Chamberlain signed in the Munich Agreement. They both contain signatures from Hitler saying, I'm not going to invade Czechoslovakia. I'm not going to go against the church. And they were both useless. So yeah. That's Nazi policies towards the church. Then the Protestant and Confessional. Well, in 1934, two Protestant priests or bishops, they're called pastors. This is bishops, but from now on, if I ever say priests, I mean pastors. Well, two Protestant bishops were arrested, and they were released after public outcry, but they still were arrested. So it just shows how, from 1934, when Hitler became Führer, there were attacks to the Protestant Church from the beginning. This I mentioned in my other video. 700 Prussian Protestant pastors were arrested for condemning Nazi neo-paganism. This is what I mentioned in that video, and how I like to refer to as PPP. 700 Prussian Protestant pastors. So it's like the 700 PPP. And I just remember it that way, and it works. Well, the Confessional Church, like I said, was born in 1935, and it exploited divisions, it marginalized Christians, and it was like repression, which went completely against Gleichschaltung. If you remember what Gleichschaltung meant, was a one-party state. So Nazis did not like this, and at first they did want to appease the Protestant Church because 58% of the population was Protestant. They could not go without the Protestant Church support. So they did encourage SA weddings, SS attendance at services. Like, yeah, go. To encourage them to go and to make it seem like Nazis supported the church. But in reality, it was also a way to keep control. If at any service there was an SS member, then the priest would not dare to go against the Nazi regime. So it's kind of intimidation too. It's kind of smart, if I may say so. Then, the Reich Church. Well, of course, there's going to be a ton of Nazi policies towards the Reich Church because, it was created by the Nazis. Like I mentioned before, Hitler believed in this idea of positive Christianity. But he was raised a Catholic. It's like Hitler, he was a vegan because he did not want animals to suffer. But Jews can suffer. The hypocrisy. Well, he was raised a Catholic, like I said, and he broke away, and he didn't like the church that much, and he basically wanted to, and I quote, stamp out Christianity in root and branch. One is either a Christian or a German. You can't be both. So that's basically saying, if you want to be an Aryan or a German, because for him that's the same thing. Not all Germans are Aryans, but all Aryans are Germans. If you want to be an Aryan, you have to follow my church, not the Christian church, because the Christian church promotes other ideas, and of course, Christ was a Jew. And oh God, it was a Jew, how dare they? That's that. Lee Borman Heydrich wanted a complete reform of the church, like of Protestants, atheists, and like I said, he disliked the Christian church because Christ was a Jew. I still don't get why the Jews are literally blamed for everything. I don't know what they did. I really don't understand. Well, when it was created, it was to unify Protestant churches. Officially unified, created in 1935, I think. Created in 1936, with the Protestant churches merged together. And like I said, the Reich bishop, which was the highest position you could get, because next higher was leading Nazis and then was Hitler, was Ludwig Müller. In 1936, the NSLB, which is like Association for Nazi Teachers, which I will get into when I talk about eventually in one other video on Nazi policies towards young people and education. but the NSLB was encouraged to not teach religions at schools, and it's kind of gonna sound a bit, but I agree with that. I don't think religion should be taught in schools. If anything, all religions, but not, you shouldn't teach Catholicism at school, you shouldn't teach Protestantism. Children should be allowed to choose if they want to believe, and if they want to believe, what should they believe in? So that's one thing one of the very few things I agree with them in. You shouldn't have the church in schools. Like where I study, there's religious education where you look at different perspectives, and that's what you should do instead of just Catholicism, Protestantism. In 1937, 200 priests were put on trial for currency trafficking, crosses being banned from schools. Later on they would be reinstated. And these are the same 200 priests that were also, not all of them were for a sex scandal, but those were some of the priests that were arrested when I mentioned the Catholic Church before. So there was this church secession campaign to persuade renouncing of Christianity. Apparently 5% were God believers. 5% of people were God believers. And if you wanted to be a Nazi party member, I'm not even saying like a high-ranking one, if you wanted to hold even the lowest of offices, you could not be a member of any of the churches. You cannot follow any of them. Which I disagree with them. If you want to do well in life, you shouldn't be restricted by your religion. At the same time, you should be given the choice to of what religion you want to follow, if you want to follow any of them. So that was Nazi policies towards the church. Now, all this is because Nazis, by 1934 onwards, they were looking to establish Volksgemeinschaft, so making everything into the same. Like one community, Aryan supremacy deal. So they did kind of succeed, also kind of failed, but they did kind of succeed. And this is why. Like in Catholic Church, they did sign the Concordat. Again, really useless. On the 20th of July, 1933, my birthday. I know, whenever I mention that date, it's my birthday, but you're gonna have to deal with that. And it was basically a way, like I mentioned, to respect each other. They're like, okay, fine. Imagine I'm the Nazi party. Fine, you can keep being in Germany, you can keep giving Catholic services, as long as you don't tell your people to go against my regime, fine. We won't tell our people to go against your ideology. You got a deal? So Pius XI signed the Concordat. However, the SA were also ordered to attend church. Like I mentioned, it was also to show the Nazi support towards the church, but it was also a way to make sure the church were going along with what the Nazis said. Because if you had SA or even SS members there, you would not say, oh my god, Hitler is so bad. As long as you said that, or even arrested, but it's the Nazis. You never know. Well, Juan Galen, he was the Bishop of Munster. He actually, when he remilitarized the Rhineland, he's like, yes, thank you so much. He even blessed Hitler. Juan Galen, the same guy who later on posed opposition. But that shows that at the beginning, the Nazi Party did have the support of significant, why did I say younger? Of significant figures in the Catholic Church. So they did have the support of the church. Like I said, the 200 priests arrested for currency trafficking and for sex scandals. That was also a way of showing how the Nazis succeeded in controlling the Catholic Church. Well, in 1939, Hitler managed to survive an assassination attempt, and this cardinal, Haber, again, butchered it, he made out this huge celebration. Like, oh, praise the Lord, Hitler is alive. He's here to fight for us one more day. And in 1940, the churches welcomed the attack on the USSR, I think including Juan Galen. Juan Galen actually was kind of a big, not big Nazi, but supporter. He supported Nazis. Then he would turn on them, but I'm going to talk about that in a second. Well, that was the Catholic Church. Then the Protestant or the Confessional. Well, the right church started to take over the Protestant churches. The 700 Protestant pastors that were arrested were also kind of evidence that the Nazis did control the Protestant church. They also welcomed the attack on the USSR, and again, SA were also ordered to attend the church. Like I said, it's not because they want to show their support, it's to have them there to stop the spreading of anti-Nazi propaganda. Nothing Nazis did to show their support. Again, unless it's with Hitler. So, again, it's just to stop anti-Nazi propaganda. And the right church, it's not, there's no evidence supporting, no evidence that shows the right church was controlled by the Nazis, because the right church was controlled by the Nazis. It wasn't, I know that doesn't make sense, but it's not like the right church existed and then the Nazis took over. It was a Nazi policy. So, they had, it was a kind of Protestantism based, and the German Christians had a swastika in our breast and God in our heart. Okay, if you say so. And they had this guy, Horst Wessel, as a martyr. Anyway, so that's how they were quite effective in controlling the church. Now, personally, and I'm going to get into this in a second, I really don't think they were that successful. Because, and I'm going to get into it, again, Catholic and Protestant. They were really successful in controlling the right church because that was a Nazi institution, so. The Catholic Church, well, Nazism and Catholicism had separate beliefs. Nazism believes in the Führer myth and the Hitler myth. Hitler is a messiah. Catholicism believes in God being the savior, Christ, not Hitler. Explain? It's completely different, so they're not going to get along. When you went to Bavaria, Bavaria, like I said, it was more Protestant, relatively. There were still Catholics there. But when you went to Bavaria and you went into Catholic areas, instead of saying Heil Hitler, like many others would, they said, God be with you. Which, yeah, if you hear this, you think, yeah, it's not that bad. They're blessing Hitler as he goes by. Or they're blessing the Nazis. But no, they are doing that, yeah. But they're saying that God is superior to Hitler just by saying that. It's just that one word, one set of words imposes supremacy over Hitler from God. Then, of course, the war. In times of crisis, people turn to extremes, not only in political parties, but also in religion. In times of desperation, you look for something greater than yourself to help you. So, of course, during the war, people would turn to Catholicism and pray. They couldn't pray to the Nazis because the Nazis were the ones putting them in the war. That was that. And then, Pope Pius XI, he did the whole with burning wreaths. I've said this once before, and I'll say it again. Useless. It was like a bunch of pamphlets that were read aloud by messengers saying, "Oh my God, Hitler! I can't believe you've done this." If you want to do something against Hitler, send an army. Do not send letters. And now what I was going to say before, Bishop Juan Galen, he actually was quite a Nazi supporter. He supported the remilitarization of the Rhineland. He supported the attack on the USSR, but he also criticized the Nazis later on, and from 1941 he became an avid critic of the Nazis. So I haven't talked about this yet, but from 1941 onwards, especially up until 1943, the whole T4 program, euthanasia program, was going on, and the Catholic Church obviously would be against it. Catholics are against euthanasia. And of course, Juan Galen knew what was happening in these places. They were killing disabled people, and he voiced his criticism. So the Nazis, of course, wanted to prosecute Juan Galen, but they couldn't. The Pope managed to protect him. So he was too popular and too high up in the hierarchy of the church that the Nazis couldn't even touch him. So that just shows how the Nazis did not control the church, the Catholic Church, because they couldn't even hurt high-ranking members. Then again, when the Nazis banned crucifixes, people were like, no. Some just took them off, some hanged them and then took them off right before an inspection came, because you had them. But what I imagine it would be like, you had your little cross sign with Hitler, like, put up, and then you had your Hitler portrait, like, face down on the counter. You were doing stuff at home, and then suddenly this Nazi official, SS, knocks at your door. Before you answer, you quickly change the cross to Hitler, and then hide the cross, and then open the door. So that's how I imagine things would be. And others openly protested, but they did not get much done. It's the Nazis, come on. And then the Protestant Confessional Church. Well, yeah, the Nazis wanted to unify. Sorry, she always does it. But the Nazis wanted to unify the church, the Protestant church. But the fact that Martin Niemöller and Dietrich Bonhoeffer managed to break away from the church, that's not going to look good for the Nazis. They did not control the Protestant church, because if they had done so, the Confessional Church would have never existed, because it was founded in 1935 when the Nazis were already in power. Hitler was already Führer. So that was kind of a big failure. So the church was made exclusively to interfere with the Reich Church, and it did have like 5,000 priests or around that. That was also with the Protestant church, and in some areas, which were traditional areas, which, I mean, you'd think they had the support. They supported Nazis. Well, these areas actually went back to the Confessional Church or Protestant Church, because they wanted their church celebrations to be more traditional. Yeah, they were normally traditional, but here comes Hitler and says, you're going to follow the Reich Church. And of course, they would have said, no, we want to follow the traditional Protestant Church. So they would have done that. So yeah, that is Nazi policies towards the church. Now, it always comes up when asked if the Nazis were successful in controlling the church under Volksgemeinschaft. I think not. I think they weren't that successful, because the Catholic Church, well, Juan Galen wasn't really hurt. The whole God be with you thing, the protests with the banning of crucifixes, then with the Protestant Church, the whole the existence of the Confessional Church shows that they didn't manage to put Volksgemeinschaft on the church. So that's pretty much it. I think there's not much else to talk about relating to the church. There is opposition from the church to the war, but that's not important right now. This is like opposition. That is like the church and Nazi regime and how they were controlled. And then opposition, I already talked about this in the other video. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching.